It was a cold winter night in December 2018, and I had just moved into my new apartment in the small town of Millfield. My name is David, and back then, I was 27 years old. Moving to Millfield was supposed to be a fresh start for me, a chance to leave behind the noise and chaos of the city, to find some peace and quiet in a slower-paced town. Little did I know that the peace I was searching for would soon be shattered by a series of phone calls that would haunt me for years to come. The first call came late one night, about 2 weeks after I had settled in. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was lying in bed, struggling to fall asleep. My mind was restless, as it often was, and I kept tossing and turning, unable to find a comfortable position. Just as I was on the verge of drifting off, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see the name of a friend or family member, but instead, the caller ID showed unknown. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer. It was late, and I wasn't in the mood for any nonsense. But something compelled me to pick up the phone, curiosity perhaps, or maybe just the need to confirm it was nothing serious. "Hello?" I answered, my voice a little shaky from the surprise. There was no response, just silence. I could hear the faint crackle of static on the other end, but nothing else. I waited for a few seconds, expecting the person to speak, but they didn't. Annoyed, I hung up and dismissed it as some prank or technical glitch. But then it happened again. And again. For the next few nights, I kept getting these calls. Always around the same time, always from unknown, and always with nothing but silence on the other end. At first, it was just irritating, a small nuisance in the grand scheme of things. But as the calls persisted, they started to get under my skin. Who would be calling so late, just to say nothing? Maybe it was just some kid playing a prank, or someone dialing the wrong number repeatedly. Whatever it was, I tried to brush it off. But then, one night, everything changed. It was a Friday evening, and I had just gotten home from work. I was tired, mentally drained from a long day, and looking forward to a quiet night of relaxation. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly flipping through channels, when my phone buzzed again. This time, the call came earlier than usual, around 8 p.m. I looked at the screen, and sure enough, it was the same unknown caller. With a deep sigh, I answered the phone, already expecting the same eerie silence. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This time, though, there was a response. A low, raspy whisper that sent chills down my spine. "David." I froze. The voice knew my name. My heart started pounding in my chest as I sat there, gripping the phone tightly. I couldn't bring myself to speak. My throat felt dry, like it had closed up in fear. "David, I know what you did." The voice continued, barely above a whisper. My mind raced. What was this person talking about? What did they know? I hadn't done anything wrong, at least nothing that would warrant this kind of creepy phone call. But the way the voice spoke, it was as if they were holding some dark secret over me, something that I couldn't even remember. "Who is this?" I finally managed to stammer, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound in control. The voice chuckled, a sound so cold and menacing that it made my blood run cold. "That's not important," the voice replied, the words hanging in the air like a sinister fog. "What's important is that you're not alone." With that, the call ended abruptly, leaving me sitting there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed against my ear. For a moment I couldn't move. My mind was reeling from the words I had just heard. Not alone? What did that mean? Was someone in the apartment with me? I quickly glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, but everything seemed normal. Still, the unease lingered. I checked the locks on all the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure before sitting back down on the couch. But I couldn't relax. My eyes kept darting to the phone, waiting for it to ring again. The calls didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, they became more frequent, more menacing. The voice never gave a name, never explained what it wanted, but it knew things about me, things that no stranger should know. It knew where I worked, the route I took to get there, even the name of my childhood dog. Every time the phone rang, I felt a growing sense of dread, knowing that the voice would reveal something new, something unsettling. One night, I decided to confront the caller. I was tired of feeling like a prisoner in my own home, constantly looking over my shoulder. I waited until the usual time, sitting in the dark with the phone in my hand, ready to answer when it rang. Sure enough, at 11:30 p.m., the call came. "Hello?" I answered, trying to sound confident even though my heart was racing. "David," the voice whispered, drawing out my name in that same eerie tone. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice barely steady as I tried to assert some control over the situation. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought the caller might hang up. But then the voice spoke again, this time with a chilling clarity. "Look behind you." My blood turned to ice. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I slowly turned around, half expecting to see someone standing right behind me. But there was nothing, just the empty room, bathed in the pale light from the street lamp outside. I let out a shaky breath, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If this is some kind of sick joke, you need to stop." The voice laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo in the empty room. "Oh, David," it whispered, "this is no joke. I'm closer than you think." The call ended with a click, leaving me in a state of utter terror. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and groan of the old apartment felt amplified in the silence, making me jump at the slightest noise. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the voice on the other end of the line was right. Someone was there, just out of sight. The next morning, I contacted the police. I explained the situation, hoping they could trace the calls or at least offer some advice on what to do. They took my statement and assured me they would look into it, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. After all, it was just a voice on the phone, no threats, no evidence of a crime. But I knew something was wrong. The calls didn't stop, even after I changed my number. Somehow, the caller always found me, always knew when to reach out and remind me that I wasn't alone. Then, one night, it escalated to a point that I'll never forget. It was late February, and the snow was falling heavily outside. I was in the kitchen, trying to distract myself by making a late-night snack when my phone buzzed on the counter. By now, I had grown accustomed to the late-night calls, but this time, something felt different. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as I reached for the phone, my hand shaking. The caller ID showed. "Unknown," as always. With a deep breath, I answered. "David," the voice said, more forcefully this time. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my nerves stretched to the breaking point. "I'm here," the voice replied, sending a jolt of fear through me. "What do you mean here?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a pause, and then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. "Check your front door." My heart skipped a beat. I slowly turned my gaze toward the front door, which was just visible from the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat as I noticed something I hadn't seen before, something that hadn't been there just moments ago. There was a shadow under the door. Someone was standing outside. I froze, the phone still pressed to my ear, my mind racing. How did they get here? What did they want? I felt like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move, unable to think. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The voice didn't answer. Instead, I heard a soft knock on the door, a slow, deliberate tapping that sent shivers down my spine. Tap. 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 I stood there, paralyzed with fear, as the knocking continued, each tap growing louder, more insistent. I wanted to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there like a helpless fool. But my body wouldn't respond. Tap. 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 The knocking stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was even more terrifying. I strained to hear anything, footsteps, breathing, anything that would give me a clue as to who was on the other side. But there was nothing. And then, the voice spoke again, this time so close it felt like it was right next to me. I'm inside. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor as I stumbled back, my eyes darting around the room. But there was no one there. No sign of forced entry, no sound of footsteps, nothing. Just the cold, empty room and the overwhelming sense of dread that filled the air. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and bolted out of the apartment, not caring that I was leaving everything behind. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, the engine roaring to life as I sped out of Millfield, out of the nightmare that had taken hold of my life. I never went back to that apartment. I moved to a different state, changed my number again, and tried to start fresh, but the memory of those calls still haunts me. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I'll hear the faint buzz of my phone, and my heart will skip a beat. I'll glance at the screen, half expecting to see, unknown, staring back at me, waiting to remind me that no matter how far I run, I'll never be alone. And in those moments, I can still hear that voice, whispering in the darkness, closer than ever before.